B-2 stealth bomber. No civilians ever see this, just Air Force personnel, and nobody gets that close to it.
MTV got a cheap, exciting show, and the Air Force got access to its most valuable demographic.
We have a message that just came in for the crew of Road Rules. The message states...
Also in March 2001, TBS Superstation piloted a competition between teams of real soldiers called War Games. Football star Howie Long did the play-by-play. Ann Powell, daughter of then Secretary of State Colin Powell, provided commentary. On the very same day, Fox kicked off its reality show, Boot Camp.
The premise is simple. For the first 7 weeks, 8 men and 8 women, all called recruits, go through rigorous U.S. Marine boot camp training.
There were 16 contestants that are in boot camp for 2 months. They are put to the test. Grueling challenges, getting up early, being basically in the military. And each episode, one person is voted off. After the person is voted off, he or she picks another person off the show.
You might notice that boot camp resembles the hit show Survivor. CBS thought so too and sued Fox. Apart from Survivor, though, boot camp seemingly took its cues from the newly launched Army of One recruitment campaign, which also featured a reality TV-style series of webisodes about recruits in basic training. Both essentially had the same plot. Both employed a similar aesthetic, even some of the same graphics. It was difficult to tell the two apart, but perhaps this was the point.
Only at GoArmy.com.
In fact, boot camp was a cooperative venture between Fox and the Marine Corps. Captain Sean Haney, director of the Marine Corps Entertainment Liaison Office in Los Angeles, stated, "Right now, reality TV is the big thing. We are the first service to step into the survival reality shows. We looked at it as an opportunity to give the public a glimpse into the Marine Corps." Not to be outdone, the creator of Survivor, Mark Burnett, produced a show for the USA Network called Combat Missions.
And I brought in some of the best feature film people to help me make it look great. I brought in my pyrotechnics people who just came off Pearl Harbor and Windtalker with John Woo. I brought in my military advisors who were also on Pearl Harbor. The guys from Traffic did all my helicopter stunts and aerials. The results are pretty spectacular.
But Combat Missions also contained a grim lesson. Burnett's first pick for a contestant was a former Navy SEAL named Scott Helvenston, who soon became a favorite on the show. Only a year after Combat Missions aired, Helvenston again appeared on television, this time in Iraq. Iraqi resistance ambushed an SUV in Fallujah, killing all 4 people inside, including Helvenston. The insurgents videotaped the event and distributed the footage. Virtually without exception, the news referred to the dead as civilian contractors. In fact, they were mercenary soldiers working for a private company called Blackwater USA, one of many such contractors that the Pentagon now uses in place of government soldiers. Pictures of the crowd dragging the charred bodies through the streets of Fallujah became some of the more defining images of the war. Helvenston's story, while tragic, draws into sharp focus the line between reality and reality TV. The Air Force decided that it wanted a piece of the reality TV pie too. Its entertainment liaison office commandeered the help of an old friend, Tony Scott, who had directed Top Gun, a movie that turned out to be one of the biggest recruiting successes in the history of military Hollywood collaboration. Along with director Ridley Scott, they produced American Fighter Pilot for CBS.
Mavericks airborne.
3 men, 110 days, 1 will be Top Gun.
The show began airing in March of 2002. The producers decided that the powerful imagery of 9/11 and the rhetoric of the war on terror ought to be woven into the show's teaser.
We're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Our country is strong. Clem, a great people has been moved to defend a great nation.
Other military reality shows aired in the summer of 2002, including VH1's Military Diaries, where armed service personnel kept video journals of their days. Perhaps one of these shows inspired the idea for ABC's Profiles from the Front Line, which began shooting around this time. Recall that Profiles was the prototype for the embedded reporting system. The show began its run in early 2003. As the invasion approached, however, ABC canceled Profiles, presumably to make way for the big reality TV war.
We are seeing this battle unlike any war we've ever been able to witness, almost instantaneous. Some is very dramatic. We've got some footage from the Department of Defense of the U.S. Army Rangers in a battle that raged last night. Let's look and listen.
What characterized embedded reporting first and foremost was its privileging of experience over understanding.
We had very little perspective on what was happening at home and the other pieces of the puzzle. We could follow our unit closely, but we didn't have much connectivity with the outside world.
Just experiencing the sights, sounds, and smells of the scene became the objective.
Give us a feel for the latest, Greg, and also can you give us a feel for, is there a smell in the air? Is there a pace that's quickening? Give us a feel for what it's like to be in the middle of all that.
It's on a personal level of what that was like. What did you see? What did you hear? What did you feel?
And we had one incoming a short time ago, and then another one just moments ago that I could feel. You know, earlier we watched bombs fall on southern Iraq and felt the concussion. They were 2,000-pound bombs, JDAMs, and they lit up the sky.
Significant amount of explosions taking place.
We can certainly hear it. It's just kind of...
Only the most superficial information seemed to survive in this new environment.
All right, I apologize. As you can imagine, it's really hard to hear you and even hear myself here on the flight line. The F-14 that you just saw take off, I'm not going to give you full names at this point. I'm going to stick with call signs. That was Crunchy and Rico taking off in that jet. Prior to that, it was Tonto and Sully.
Go out. They are obviously firing at Iraq into the border region. They're firing 96-pound high explosive artillery shells.
If Vietnam was the first living room war, Iraq in 2003 was the final collapse of the distinction between home front and battlefield.
They are out of the 3rd Infantry Division. Whoa! I got to tell you, it's a rather surreal experience watching these things go off as close as we are.
The embedding system also featured a compulsion to equate reporters with soldiers. This was done in a number of ways. Many news organizations simply opted to use the word "we" in place of the military.
How would a war with Iraq actually unfold? What targets might we attack first? Which divisions would be the first to fire?
So if we decide to attack Iraq again, what will be different this time around?
Well, that raises a good question. Now that we are trumpeting our location,
absolutely,
and we're announcing where we are, what does that mean? Have we opened ourselves up to any possible
Instead of a check on power, a fourth estate, the media took their role to be what General Tommy Franks described as the fourth front, an extension of military power. Domestic public opinion thus entered the sphere of battle. If the press was now a useful weapon, objective journalism was the first casualty.
Brian, we're on a security mission of sorts once again, this time on the lookout for Iraqi tanks and armored vehicles that are still lurking east of Baghdad. We killed 3 tanks yesterday.
Back in the studio, even anchors adopted military language.
Britt Hume live with us in Washington. Britt's going to stand down for a little while, do some reporting of his own, and he'll be back.
By its very structure, the embedding system seemed to prompt a new way of speaking about journalism.
Mike Surrey reporting with the 1st Marines in Iraq. He's been with them from California, traveled overseas with them, and very deeply embedded in a personal way with the Marines that he's traveling with.
But Shepard Smith of Fox News probably put it most succinctly.
We have a number of correspondents in bed with our troops across the region, some in Kuwait, some in...
So long as reporters were now in bed with the military instead of just covering it, they might as well be fitted not only with microphones, but with tanks too.
Why don't you take a walk over and talk to Baghdad Bob and see if he wants to admit that, or bring a tank with you and introduce
Baghdad Bob to the great tank guys. Number 3.
There were a few rare moments of self-reflection regarding this new relationship with the military.
CNN's Jason Bellini is embedded with the Marine unit, and he was also involved in the effort, or he was involved in covering the effort. Let's not mistake anybody's roles here.
But it was the embedded reporter from CBN and Pat Robertson's 700 Club